Hey everybody, I am out here outside trying to get away from everybody in my house. Let me figure out how to do this the best way so I can see y'all. Okay. Okay, so I just want to tell you a little bit about how to do your parenthetical citations and just make sure everybody knows how to do that correctly. So I want to show you this little slide. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is just how to do the in-text citations in case you're confused about that. This is taken almost exactly from your MLA guide, which you have on the syllabus and on the research project explanation document that I gave you. Okay, so it's just called in-text documentation, or some of you might have learned parenthetical citations or parenthetical documentations. And when I was in school, we used to use footnotes, which was really, really hard. And so now it's so easy to do these in-text citations because you just put the parentheses after the information right there in your sentence instead of having to put a footnote and then go back to the end to put it at the bottom of your page. Or later we would do end notes. So anyway, it's just a lot easier now. Just believe me when I say it's easier. And so the point of these citations is to make sure you don't plagiarize. It's just so you can make clear what information you took from a source. Okay. And this is just basically what you do. You put the author's name and the page number in parentheses. Like right here, this is the author of my document or my article, and that's the page number it was on. Or you can do this. You can put the author's name in your signal phrase at the beginning of your sentence. As McGlynn writes, there needs to be a cell phone policy so that students turn their cell phones off, blah, blah, blah. So I just quoted those two things verbatim. Then I put my quotation marks, and then there's the page number. Since I put the author's name right up there, I don't have to put the author's name there again. I wouldn't mark it wrong if you did, but you don't have to. When you're punctuating these things, I find that I often am writing this on your documents. Just remember that you don't put any punctuation between the name and the page numbers. So again, if this is a quote from my source, here is how I punctuate everything. So this person said, we need to get their work back to them quickly, and we need to give them praise. This was from McGlynn on page 22. There is the period. It looks strange because normally, if we did not have this citation, we would put the period right there before the quotation marks. They would go inside. The period would go inside the quotation mark. But with in-text citations, we put the period at the end. Okay? So that's exactly what it looks like. Quotation mark there. Do your whole quote. There's your closing quotation mark. And then you have one space. And then there is your in-text documentation. Author's name, space, page number, end of the parentheses, period. Okay? And this is one thing MLA says, whether you use a signal phrase in parentheses or parentheses only, try to put the parenthetical documentation at the end of the sentence or as close as possible to the material you've cited without awkwardly interrupting the sentence. And again, this is what I was just going over. The parenthetical reference comes after the closing quotation mark, but before the period at the end of the sentence. And I guess you can't really see that one right there. I'm sorry, y'all. But I had you a little quote, a little example of that. Okay, again, look at the punctuation. This is the quote. After all, the Snapchat generation may produce more writing than any group of teenagers before it, writing copious text messages and social media posts. But when it comes to formal writing expected at school and work, they struggle with the mechanics of simple sentences. That's the end of the quote. Space, parentheses, author's last name, the page number that quote was on, end of the parentheses, and then your period. Some people will say, well, what if my article does not have an author? And occasionally that will be the case, not very often, especially if you're using scholarly articles. But if that is the case, then you're going to put part of the title of your article. It's basically however you do your works cited entry. If you do that the correct way, this should match that. This was an example that was in the MLA book. A powerful editorial in last week's paper asserts that healthy liver donor Mike Hurwitz died because of frightening, faulty post-operative care. Now, this was not a quotation. This was a paraphrased statement. The only part that was quoted was the word frightening. And then here is the citation, Every Patient's Nightmare. That was the title of the article, and it was an online source. There was no page number given. So that's why it looks like that. And then there's the period at the end. What if there are no page numbers? That will often be the case when you have an online source. And if that is true, then you just provide what you have. Now, one thing that I will do if my online source it might not have it written right there on the computer, but you can see on the citation it says it was in the New York Times on page 8. So then I will use that page number. But you won't. Sometimes you just won't have a page number, and that's okay. So just include any other information, like right here. Studies show that music training helps children to be better at multitasking later in life. Again, it was just the title of an article. There was no author. There was no page number. So this is all the information I have as far as the beginning information. Now, after that, on my works cited page, I would have where this was published, when it was published, what the URL is, and when I accessed it. But in my citation, I'm just trying to give a little bit of information to direct the reader to my works cited page where there will be the full bibliographic information. And so this is just a reminder, your items must match. Do your works cited page correctly, and then whatever is in your in-text citation should match that. So here's an example. I sent you guys my sample works cited page, and there, this was one of my sources. This was the author, the title, the journal it was in, the volume number and information about that, when it was published, the page numbers of that article, and then the database where it was contained. And then this was the URL, and that was when I accessed that article. So that is on my works cited page. I'm not going to put all of that inside my essay. I'm just going to put this in-text citation. Now, I put 19 there because one of my quotes does come from page 19, but as you can see, there are other pages. So I might have another quote that comes from page 22. If so, I put McGlynn 22. Again, no little p. I don't put page or anything. I don't put a comma or all that good stuff. And so we're just matching, trying to match that and that. Make sure whatever's in your in-text citation is the first word for that source on the works cited page. You got it? I hope you all understand what you're doing now, and just let me know if you're confused about anything. But that's just a brief summary of how to do parenthetical citations, and just making sure that you include that your citation and your works cited page match. All right. Thanks, guys.